Welcome on in, football fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and prop preview for Thursday night football between the Ravens and the Dolphins. Gonna get you guys ready for all of your exposure on Thursday. But first off, a breakdown of the Draftkings side and what we're doing for our single game lineups. That'll include the game scripting, the game total, also an injury report before lock, and some of my favorite plays across the board. And then afterwards, we're gonna go through the Underdog and the Prize Picks side. With a few props I've already entered for Thursday, you might want to consider tailing for yourself. So by the end, you'll have a complete game plan for all of your exposure to come. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this thing going. Before we begin going player by player, let's give an idea of the game environment at hand, which has a 51 point over under, one of the highest on all of week number 9, and also a 7.5 point spread favoring Baltimore, which is a lot to do with Lamar Jackson returning, but the high total itself has to do with these two defenses being porous on that side of the ball. They've been some of the worst defenses both against the pass and against the rush, and in fact, when you put it all together, two of the bottom 3 defenses in all of the NFL, so that's why we're expected to see some fireworks here, and in particular from Baltimore that has their starter back. And let's start with him at $11,800, a bit expensive, especially because he could be a little bit limited on the ground in his first week back, but still a 22 raw point projection. So the highest that we have on the slate, the ceiling is there as well at truly a 30 plus point ceiling. It has to do with the fact that he could throw you for 2 touchdowns, rush for a touchdown, maybe even give you 100 rushing yards from time to time as well. He's extremely versatile, and almost every lineup on Thursday is going to have him. I've got him at 92.6% combined ownership between the flex and the captain position, and I can't give very much pushback on that. That's deserved. He's a borderline lock no matter which format that you're entering, and really you're just gonna try and find the salary to fit him into lineups and then move on with your other 5 spots. Next up, we got an Achane at $11,400. He's extremely expensive for the kind of role that he has, but with all of the receiving upside that he's shown in 2025, he's truly like Christian McCaffrey, a number 1 wide receiver and a number 1 running back. He's got a 21 raw point projection, and even if playing from behind, he's a bit script proof because of that contribution that he puts up from the PPR aspect. He's got a 5.5 reception line on books, so that's 5.5 PPR points right there that he's being projected for. Let alone the touchdown upside, he's minus 150 to score. He's also got like a 60 rushing yard line, a 40 receiving yard line. He's going to contribute across the board. So both of these guys up top, even though they are extremely expensive, are going to be priorities for me, which means when we get down to that value tier range from sub $3,000, it's going to be important for us to find some punts, because if we want to afford one of these two at captain and the other one at the flex position, and that's going to be a priority for me tonight, then I'm going to have to find the salary to make that work. So we'll expand on that towards the bottom end of the board, but 2 very expensive players that also, if you take a look at the points per dollar projection, are the best plays that we have up top. You've got 1.7x, 1.6x, 1.5x on guys like Atua. You got to go the whole way down to Zay Flowers to find another 1.9x points per dollar projection, which is why it is so important to have some of those values towards the bottom. But next up, let's go through Derrick Henry at $11,000. He is also extremely expensive, but with Lamar Jackson coming back, I think a lot of people are going to run to the wide receivers and tight ends, but don't forget about the impact on the running back position. It's not necessarily that he's expected to be throwing the ball a whole bunch to Derrick Henry. It's more so the game script that favors that position. Running backs are extremely dependent on the amount of touches that they're getting, and that really impacts their projection and what they're going to do fantasy-wise. If a team's playing from a touchdown or 2 ahead, that's going to give the running back a lot of extra second half usage. In fact, sometimes the running back will only get 5 carries in the second half if they're playing from way behind, whereas they could see 15 to 20 touches in the second half if they're playing from ahead. Derrick Henry, because of his bruising style, somebody that runs between the tackles, is definitely one of those players. So at $11,000, I like him at the captain position for a little bit of differentiation. We do have my player pool blacked out. Of course, guys, these projection sheets can be found on my Patreon page. Link down below. NFL DFS tiers, how you get access to all of them. But you can see with the early projected ownership numbers on a Derrick Henry, I've got him at about 10% at captain, which is spot in line with an Achane, a little bit lower, in fact, than his projected ownership. Lamar is going to be a glaring 25% at that captain spot, so I'm okay with that single entries in cash. You don't really have to get that different at captain or those kind of formats, but in large scale GPPs where we're trying to play against the field a little bit, guys like Derrick Henry can make a whole lot of sense. And I know we didn't expand too much on the ownership aspect before, but because the Ravens are 7.5 point favorites, everyone on the Baltimore side is going to be a little bit higher owned, and it's not just from an individual player perspective, but also from the total lineup construction. You're going to see a lot of 4-2 Ravens lineups. I'd say 2 pass catching options from Dolphins, maybe one of them being a Tua, then +1 pass catcher is going to be by far the most common lineup construction that you see. But if you want to play a more common lineup construction like that and try and get some differentiation in there, rather than going with Lamar captain, who's going to be by far the most popular player there, Derrick Henry might be a really good option for that, because again, fan. Everyone's going to be flocking to the wide receivers, tight ends, Lamar, because he's returning, but don't sleep on the kind of impact that has on King Henry. Next up, we got a Jalen Waddle, who's been by far the top receiving option for the Dolphins ever since Tyreek Hill left. He had Achane, I guess, at number 2 up there, but in terms of yardage, Waddle's been the king over the last couple weeks, and he is $10,400, which for a typical price tag on Waddle would probably be about $2,000 too expensive. With the kind of role that he's been seeing, I think it's appropriate. And it's not like he's one of the best projecting plays towards the top. He's only a 1.6x points per dollar value, which is in fact one of the lower numbers towards the guys that are over $9,000. But he's still very usable considering the game script at hand. The Dolphins are 7.5 point underdogs. Tua is expected to be throwing the ball quite a bit, especially in the second half if that's the case. And that's all going to be favorable for his projection. So I mentioned that 4-2, maybe using a Tua and then one pass catching option as the buyback. I'm going to be doing that a lot in my single entries in cash, but because of how much ownership are even behind these players on the Dolphins, like a Waddle is still 43% owned, a Tua is still 36% owned. Because of that 51 point total, it's not like you're getting that much differentiation there. So that's why I would leave those kind of lineup constructions to the single entries in cash, where you're not playing against 50 to 100,000 other entries. It's mentioned Tua now. Tua's only got a 1.5x points per dollar projection, a bit expensive, we'd say, at $10,000, but with the total, with the fact that they're expected to be playing from behind, you cannot ignore him in your exposure. If he throws for 2 touchdowns, that would be his way to the optimal lineup. Even if it's just 1 touchdown plus 300 plus passing yards, that could be his way there too. So he can get there, but there are better plays, I'd say, up here in this $10,000 range. Speaking of, Zay Flowers at $9,400 is, in my opinion, the best spend up that we have on the slate. And there's a massive gap between Zay Flowers and the next priced player. You can see Zay Flowers is $9,400, and Rashad Bateman is only $6,400 himself. So that is a $3,000 gap, which I think means that Zay Flowers is going to be lower owned than he should be, because when you have that $3,000 gap in salary from one player to another, people would rather spend the extra $600 to extra $1,000 and take one of these more premier options. And though Flowers is cheaper than a Waddle and a Tua, look at that raw point projection. And these are my projections. They are going to be different than what you see from the rest of the industry. Zay Flowers with Lamar Jackson projects better than Jalen Waddle. It projects even better than a Tua Tagovailoa. So I'd rather have him. And you can see slightly higher ownership number, but I think from the lineup construction standpoint, I'm not sure if that's actually going to be the case. If you leave some salary on the table and you use a Zay Flower instead of one of these other 2 players, your total cumulative ownership is going to be higher because he's 53% owned, but leaving that salary on the table is going to also mix in some of that differentiation. We know that people love spending all of their salary in large scale GPPs, even in cash and single entries. They like to leave at most like $300 to $500 on the table. If you're leaving salary on the table to play a Zay Flowers who's projecting better and has that higher ownership, I would argue that you're going to have a much lower chance of duplication than spending all of your salary and taking that lower cumulative ownership. And these are some of the nuances that come when putting together your lineup construction, knowing what portion of the field will spend all of their salary in large scale GPPs. It's not quite like golf DFS where literally 99.99% of people spend within $300 of the maximum, but it's still a vast majority of lineups, especially your casual players in the large field GPPs, that are going to be spending the full $50,000. So don't sleep on the Zay Flowers, in my opinion, the best player that we have in this 9K range. And I guess I'll throw it into the 10K range. We'll throw them all there in together. The best raw point projection and the one that's on the side with the higher implied team total as well. But now let's do that big drop off, going from $9,400 the whole way down to $6,400. We've got Bateman there, who is going to be extremely low owned, only 12% combined ownership between the flex and the captain spot, but he's way too expensive. He's only got a 1.2x points per dollar projection. So if you're looking to get extremely different and you're trying to use that 4-2 Ravens stack, anything Rashad Bateman based would be extremely different to the field. And you could use him even with some of the chalky player like a Lamar at captain, use some of the chalky spend back options as well. When you get a sub 10%er, and in particular one that's in that 5-6K range, it does wonders for the rest of your lineup construction. So he's not one of my favorite plays. I don't currently have Rashad Bateman in my player pool, but as I start to build my large scale GPP exposure throughout the rest of the day and throughout tomorrow, there's a really good chance that he squeezes his way in, because you only have to use him in 15 to 20% of lineups to get some leverage to the field. And I think it's worth it because he's a downfield wide receiver. He's capable of getting you a 60 to 70 yard touchdown. And while he does have an extremely low floor, would not touch him with a 10-foot pole in single entries or cash, in the right format, he is certainly usable. Next up, we got a Tyler Loop for Baltimore at $5,400. He's, of course, on the favorite side. He's a kicker, and the kickers that are on the higher implied team total are always going to have the better projection. So he's at 1.7x points per dollar. You only got a Riley Patterson on the other side for Miami at a 1.5x points per dollar projection. I will have both in my player pool. I love using kickers in Showdown. You guys have probably heard that at this point of the year if this isn't the first video that you watched from me. But in particular, I like the sides that are on the favorite. So some Tyler Loop at $5,400 will be being mixed in, especially because he's only 20% at flex. And I normally have these players, their correct ownership or their correct optimal percentage closer to 30 to 35% when they're the favorite kickers. So anytime those kickers are below 30 to 35% ownership, I'm usually going to be leveraging them in my exposure. Next up, we have Mark Andrews at $5,000. He's one of the better value plays that we have towards the middle end of the board. A huge boost with Lamar Jackson being back this week. He's also super cheap at only $5,000. And with all the priorities that we have from 11K plus, in particular Lamar and Devin Achane, we're going to need some values in the middle and especially some values towards the bottom end of the board. So Mark Andrews is going to be a core play for me on Thursday, mostly because of that salary component and of course his red zone upside. His last couple weeks with Cooper Rush or Tyler Huntley at quarterback have not gone according to plan. He's not gotten nearly as many targets as Lamar Jackson was giving him. And the last time Lamar was playing and Andrews was in there, he had a nuclear game here in 2025. So he's potentially even usable at captain. I haven't added him to my captain exposure quite yet, but with a lot of the super expensive players that we're prioritizing at the top, it might not be a bad idea to throw in somebody like Andrews, a captain, hope that he scores a touchdown, 100 yards, maybe 2 touchdowns and like 50 receiving yards at $7,500, because then you can use whoever the heck you want for your last 5 spots. And Malik Washington has been wide receiver 2 for Miami. He has been third and for the wide receivers on snaps though. So you have Waddle, who's number 1 in snap percentage. Number 2 is Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. So a little bit of a surprise there if you haven't been watching the Dolphins over the last couple weeks, but Washington has been by far the more productive wide receiver. Westbrook-Ikhine is a good blocker. He's also a more experienced player that knows the kind of plays and schemes that the Dolphins are calling up. Malik Washington is a legit downfield threat. Extremely fast. They even give him rushes out of the backfield because of the kind of athleticism that he has. So at $4,800, if you're looking for a large hill GPP nuke play, somebody that can get you 10 to 15 points, that is Malik Washington. If you're in a cash/single entry format, you want to save a bit of salary. It's a $1,600 gap from Washington the whole way down to Westbrook-Ikhine, and you care about the snap floor, you care about the PPR floor that an Ikhine will give you with those extra snaps, then you might want to go in that direction. But I would say that personally my favorite would be Malik Washington because I usually play most of my exposure in the large field GPPs, and I'm going for that top 5 to top 10 placement. I'm not necessarily worried as much about trying to finish in the top 50%. I might have a little bit of cash exposure for Thursday Night Football. Maybe that's where I avoid guys like Washington and get to my guy like Mark Andrews as a no-brainer. Again, he's the core play that I have in this range as my favorite mid-tier option. But large field GPPs, I think Malik Washington has quite a lot of upside as well. So consider him at $4,800. He's got some ownership behind him. So compared to some of the other value plays that we're about to go down towards the bottom of the board and go through, he's a little bit higher owned than some of those other players. Speaking of a low-owned flyer play, we've got Ollie Gordon II at $4,400. He saw by far the most usage that he's had at all this season last week in the blowout against the Falcons. That likely had to do with that game script giving him extra second half usage. He's a bruising back. He's an extremely powerful running back that it would not surprise me at all if he scored a touchdown on Thursday. He's the kind of running back that within the 5-yard line is going to be getting the touches over an Achane, which could be a little bit tilting if you're an Achane owner in that second half. But for large field GPPs at about 11% combined ownership, 10.5 at the flex spot, there's a lot of leverage to be had there. And he's pretty much touchdown or bust at $4,400 because you're not going to get to the optimal lineup by scoring 5 points that often at $4,400. You're more than likely going to have to get closer to 8 to 12 to 13 points to crack that optimal lineup there, but he's capable of doing that with a touchdown. So I'll be throwing him into a few large field GPP lineups because of that, but because his floor is almost non-existent, you would not want to use him in any cash or single entry lineups. And DeAndre Hopkins is another large field GPP play. He's $4,200, and Lamar Jackson coming back is massive for him as well. Whether it's been Cooper Rush or Tyler Huntley over the last month, he has been a ghost out there. He's gone like 1 to maybe 2 catches for like 20 yards. The first couple weeks of the year when Lamar Jackson was actually playing well, he had multiple touchdown game. He had a game with like 40, 50 yards and 4 catches. That's the DeAndre Hopkins that we could see at this point this year. And if we have Lamar Jackson target him in the red zone, if he scores a touchdown, that's his way to the optimal lineup. He's an extremely low floor player because he's pretty much big player bust with DeAndre Hopkins. You're not going to get that 5-catch, 50-yard game very often from him here in 2025. And that's just because he only plays 15 to 25% of snaps. He's not going to be out there the entire time. But when he's on the field, he's been targeted like a true wide receiver number one. So at $4,200, I will certainly be using him alongside of Lamar Jackson. And because they are the higher owned side, they're the chalky game script, the 4-2 or the 5-1s towards Baltimore, we're going to need some of these low-owned plays to help differentiate ourselves within that sort of a game stack. And DeAndre Hopkins, I think, is a perfect example of that. And we'll have a couple more down towards the bottom end of the list as well. The Ravens defense could be another piece of slight differentiation, a little bit higher round than DeAndre Hopkins, though, at about 17.5% at flex. What you like about the Ravens defense is that they correlate with Derrick Henry at captain. If you're going with a Derrick Henry captain lineup, you might want to throw in a Ravens defense, as all the extra usage that Derrick Henry is getting from playing from ahead also would boost the projection for the Ravens side with their defensive production. A Justice Hill at $3,600, he's not somebody that I'm personally that excited to play for Thursday Night Football. He's more of the receiving back that we have for Baltimore, also technically questionable, so we'll have to see whether he's able to suit it up or not. If not, Akeem Mitchell would see a slight uptick in usage and snap share, so keep that in mind at $1,400. But Justice Hill, you play him when the Ravens are playing from behind. He's the kind of running back that'll get you 3 to 4 catches if they're 2 touchdowns behind, and a lot of yardage as well, because those dump offs to the running back in the second half in a negative game script, they're usually giving 10 to 15 yards per catch, and they're okay with that happening on the defensive side. They're more so trying to stop the big play, not trying to let the offense take the top off of that defense, and Justice Hill is the prime beneficiary of that. Unfortunately, Baltimore are 7.5 points favorites here, so unless you think Miami is going to pull off a big upset and win this by a touchdown or two, Justice Hill probably isn't the best play. However, it is worth noting that if Baltimore is winning by a whole bunch of touchdowns, is winning by like 4 or 5, there's a chance that Keaton Mitchell sees a lot more usage, but even a Justice Hill as well. They'll throw him in there when they're playing from way ahead to protect a Derrick Henry, which is probably the only way he gets there. I just don't see Baltimore playing for way behind, but if you do think Baltimore is going to be losing this game like they have a few times this year, then all the leverage is to be had on the Dolphins. But speaking of Dolphins defense at $3,400, they are 11.1% owned at the flex position, which is one of the lowest owned numbers of anyone in this 3 to 4K range. So if you're looking to get any differentiation, play a 4-2 Dolphins, or even, God forbid, a 5-1 Dolphins stack for Thursday Night Football, they would be a clear place to correlate with maybe an H-hand captain, or maybe even an Ollie Gordon captain if you're getting really nasty about it. But I'm personally not going to have any lines that are doing that, at least as of right now. I'm not planning on building that way. You mentioned a Nick Westbrook-Akine before at $3,200. He's been playing a lot of snaps for Miami with Tyreek Hill out, but he hasn't been that productive with those snaps. He's playing 65 to 70% of them, but at most you're probably looking at a 7 to a 10 point performance, not the highest ceiling compared to some of the other players around him. Speaking of ceiling, Tylan Wallace does have an extremely high ceiling, but truly has a 0-point floor. He's the kind of guy that has cracked a Showdown slate open once a year for the last couple years, and it's with one big play. He's the kind of wide receiver with his yards after catch ability and his pure burner speed that can score 70 to 80 yard touchdowns. And because Lamar Jackson has an absolute cannon for an arm, and he's extremely accurate with his downfield ball as well, every once in a blue moon, Tylan Wallace cracks open a slate. As of right now, I'm not currently planning on using him, but if I was going to, it would only be in large field GPPs and maybe in 3 to 5% of lineups. You throw him in there just in case that big play ends up happening, because if it does, you have to have him. It's happened a few times over the last few seasons where he's been somebody that you had to have down low. So at $3,000, horrible points per dollar projection. In fact, 0.3x, like, what are we doing here? Why the heck is he $3,000 on a slate like this? But in the right format, maybe usable in a lineup or two. A Tanner Connors at $2,800 with the Darren Waller injury for Miami. He's been seeing a lot more snaps and usage over the last couple weeks. He's only got a 3.6 raw point projection though, so not the best floor as you'd imagine on that sort of a play, but is usable in large field GPPs in case he scores a touchdown. That is going to be his main way to get to that optimal lineup. And Isaiah Likely, however, is going to be a much more reliable play. I've got him at a 4.8 raw point projection, 2.4x points per dollar with that efficiency. He's a little bit higher owned at nearly 22% at the flex spot, but Lamar Jackson being back, the plethora of 2 tight end sets that Baltimore likes to run is going to lead to him playing probably 35, maybe 40% of the snaps on Thursday. And if he scores a touchdown, he would almost surely get to the optimal lineup. But even without that, he's the kind of wide receiver that could get us 3 to 4 catches for 40 yards. And because of all the really expensive players that we want to jam into our lineups, we're going to need to take some shots down here towards the bottom. And I like to do it with really good yard after catch players like a Likely, also red zone upside players like a Likely that could score us anything down there within the 20-yard line. I've got a Charlie Kohler next. If Likely or an Andrews were out, he would be a lot more intriguing, but as tight end 3 for Baltimore, he's only going to play maybe 10 to 15% of snaps, and he's going to be touchdown or bust at that sort of price tag. So personally, not my favorite play for Thursday, but we'll at least see the field for a few snaps. Akeem Mitchell could get there in a blowout scenario, but with Justice Hill active, he's not likely to play very much. If Justice Hill were to be rolled out, he is still technically questionable. Keaton Mitchell would be a lot more usable in large shell GPPs, and it wouldn't even require a blowout for him to get there necessarily. Akeem Mitchell could score a touchdown and get there in that sort of format. So that injury news will be a little bit important, especially when it comes to the punt at that team. You got a Jalen Wright next at $1,000. He's lost his running back 2 job to Ollie Gordon, so he's not my favorite play, even though he is super cheap at $1,000. He has hardly played at all over the last 2 to 3 games. So if there's a backup running back to use in Miami, in my opinion, it would be an Ollie Gordon. But of course, injuries could open up more usage ahead of him, so we at least have to mention that. At Greg Dulcich, he has seen a few more snaps over the last couple weeks with the injury to Darren Waller. He is also only $600, so I think that he's usable in large field GPPs to try and open up some extra salary towards the top. He would probably need to score a touchdown, though, to get there. Maybe he could get there with like 30 yards and 2 to 3 catches. That 5 to maybe 6 fantasy point performance might be enough to pay off a $600 price tag, but that would also require it to be a very expensive captain that is optimal, and also the fact that an Achane probably gets there as well, right? Maybe it's a Lamar captain, an Achane flex position lineup that has to get there for one of these guys down low to make sense. A D. Eskridge, he played 20 to 25% of snaps the last couple weeks for the Miami team. He did get hurt last week, so only played 1% because of that injury, but if he's healthy, he's another one of those flyer plays at wide receiver that you can consider for Miami. And then finally, we got Alec Ingold at $200. He is the fullback for Miami. He plays a lot in the red zone and kind of fits the same kind of roles that Kyle Juszczyk does for San Francisco. However, just like a Kyle Juszczyk, he's not really going to get there unless he scores. Like maybe he gets 2 catches for like 15 to 20 yards. That 4 points could pay off if it is that very expensive captain that gets there and some other really expensive players that you have to jam in to get to the optimal. But more than likely, my favorite plays towards the bottom down here, guys, are going to be your Likelies, your players like a Westbrook-Ikhine, a DeAndre Hopkins, and Ollie Gordon that are a little bit safer. And I probably won't just be using one, right? I'll use one, maybe even 2 of these value plays towards the bottom and go with more of a studs and duds approach where I can really punt on 2 positions and then have $40,000 for my other 4 spots where I can afford to take some of these premier options alongside with it. So that's how I plan on playing for Thursday Night Football. Definitely going towards that chalkier game script, but trying to be a little bit more unique and a little bit more creative within that. And now for the prop on the betting side, where I've got a couple props you might want to tail. And the first prop we're going to go through is going to be the Devin Achane over on rushing plus receiving touchdowns. He's at 0.5. He is a goblin prop on Prize Picks, but because of the specific combination that we're taking here, this is still a full 3x payout. So some value on Achane, who's over minus 150 to score, and that's on the two-way markets like Pinnacle, where you have the option to take the yes and the no. On those markets, we get much closer to the actual true odds of a player to score. Sites like Draftkings and FanDuel, where they offer the one-sided market, players only to go out there and score, don't give you the true percentage chance of a player getting there. But when we get a data point like Pinnacle at minus 150 out there towards the yes, it gives us a lot of confidence in this being a plus EV lean. So that's the first part of this. And the other thing to mention with Achane is that the Dolphins are 7.5 point underdogs. A lot of people might be a little bit scared to take an over on touchdowns at that running back position, but keep in mind that for the year, Achane has 3 touchdowns on the ground and has 4 through the air. He's much more of a receiving back than every other back that you see in the NFL. And sites like Prize Picks, they don't custom code multipliers for each specific player. Devin Achane has almost a 50-50 touchdown rate through the air and on the ground. So though there's some quote-unquote anti-correlation between these two, that's why this pays a full 3x despite this being a goblin prop, is because, and the reason I don't worry about it and the reason why I don't care about that aspect is because Achane can still score through the air. Even if they are playing by 2 or 3 touchdowns from behind in the second half, that is still going to give Achane a chance to score. So at 0.5 touchdowns, I'll mix that in, especially because we get that boosted back to 3x with the second lean that we're taking. And this all has to do with the correlation in the scripting. Lamar Jackson is expected to be playing from a touchdown or 2 ahead. That's what we have with that spread. especially the fact that he's back, has always healthy wide receivers, and they're going against a very banged up Dolphins team. At 28 passing attempts, he's already down at 27.5 passing attempts in most of the sports books. There are even sports books that have him juiced towards the under, minus 120 to minus 125 towards the under, and I actually think that that juice is going to grow as we get closer to lock, because Lamar Jackson, even before this week, was going under this line most of the time, and it's not like it's been every single time. The last time out he got hurt, so you can't really consider that one as much, but 27 attempts against Detroit, 29 against Cleveland, 19 against Buffalo, and one of the highest scoring games that we've had in the entire season. When they're playing in a decent script and they're not playing from way ahead, he is not spamming targets to his wide receivers. And in particular, if they're playing from 2 touchdowns ahead against a very porous rushing defense. You'd expect Derrick Henry to get a whole bunch of usage here for Thursday Night Football, especially because Lamar Jackson could be a little bit rusty in his first week back from injury. That's why I really like this under. It's 0.5 higher. We're getting the push equity at that number. He's already down at 27.5 and starting to juice towards the under. And again, although there's anti-correlation here, and there truly would be anti-correlation, if this was a, I don't know, even like a Jonathan Taylor or Tyler Algier, like a super rushing heavy running back that's coming at you, there would be anti-correlation between these two, but not so much when it's A-Chain who can line up in the slot, who can literally line up as a wide receiver and be just as effective as some of the other guys that they have out there in offense. I mean, he's got a 5.5 reception line for a reason. I will gladly go out there and mix these two in. And when you're getting the full payout on 2 plus EV leans, it's plus EV on Lamar Jackson with that extra 0.5 and that push equity in our back pocket, then these are the kind of value slips that I'm willing to get to. So for the rest of the exposure I'm taking for Thursday Night Football, you guys can find that on my Patreon page. NFL Prop Tier is how you get access to all of that. Every underdog slip, every prize pick slip, also anything I'm taking on HardrockBet can be accessed over there. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the Thursday Night Football preview. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Also sub to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. And comment down below who you've got as the top scorer for Thursday Night Football for a chance to earn a free month on my Patreon page. If you get the top scorer correct, you'll win a free month access to all the projections that I have to offer, including for Showdown, like you guys saw throughout this video, all the updated projections, my entire player pool for the slate, as well as main slate and all the main Showdown slates throughout the rest of the year. So make sure to check that out if you guys haven't already. Also, the Underdog and Prize Picks props that I'm adding on top of what we already went over here will also be posted on the NFL Prop Tier. Check that out if you guys haven't already. Best of luck with everything that you're going with. Hope to see a lot of your names towards the top end of the GPPs. I also hope that we can cash out on some of our prop exposure as well and add a bit to the bankroll. But until next time, hopefully you guys can cash out for everything that you're going with, and I'll see you guys then.